get my point. Let me time myself. PowerPoint tayo, no? Okay, so meron tayong category. Okay. Alright. Actually, I didn't know what title to give my lecture. Initially, I said to myself, I would title it Language, Performance, Politics. Okay, which actually sums up what I want to say today. But I think I came up with something. Someone whispered to me something last night, right? I have two best friends, right? And I call them Lucy and Lordy. Okay, and of course I have an imaginary lover as well, and I call him JCT. So any
they're very real.
Yes. All right, here it is. Ako na lang, I'll do that for you.
Just stay on that side.
Yes, I will.
Full screen.
Nilalaki yan, ano? Wala siyang bago lumaki. Okay na yan, no? Ayan, lumaki na. Okay, yes. Hindi ako size queen. Okay?
Just go to the full screen. Slide one.
Broadcast.
Yeah,
Broadcast.
It's not working.
Alright, anyways, begin. No? Once again, good morning to everyone. Right? When I was young, okay, which was more than 2 decades ago, right, poetry came to me like an oriental balm to my bruised soul. Okay, I wrote about my first love and our days by the breakwater, and that's the poem "He Who Sleeps on My Lap" or "In My Lap." Okay, I wrote about my discovery of sex, especially since I spent my childhood in a very moralistic Protestant environment. Okay, I wrote about a city, which to my naive self had just opened its doors to queens, beautiful young queens like me. Okay, poetry was the marriage between my bouts with language and my struggles in homophobic world. Truth to tell, it was easier to write because there was no inner censor then that said I shouldn't write like this or that. When you're young, you're more carefree, right? That is your gift, that's also your burden. And so I can say I was braver, I was freer then because I was naive, and ironically, happier. Okay? As you grow older, you realize more and more how life sucks in the Philippines. Okay? So let me begin with my assumptions about poetry, and this is what I'm going to share with you. For me, poetry really is a performance. Okay, not in the Richie Guevara sense of live art, no. But for me, poetry is a performance. Why? Because the writer is actually because there's a subject, who is performing. There's a subject who is being subjected. Okay, it's also performative. Poetry makes things possible, right? So. To me, poetry works as performance on 2 levels. One, as a textual, verbal performance. So let me begin with that. When I was young, I was very much inspired by Dr. Ivasco. She was my teacher in college. I ended up becoming a teacher because of her, and I have her to blame. for 26 years of torture at De La Salle University. Okay, but on a positive note, when you're young, you like mimicking, right? You want to be like someone else, diba? And I went through that phase. I wasn't, because I realized actually that my poetry was bad. After going through, after having been in workshops conducted by Dr. Bautista and Dr. Marjorie Basco and Dr. Bobis, Brenda Bobis, I realized that I wasn't as gifted as my co-fellows or classmates. So that was the beginning. But that was beginning great things. Kasi diba, when you discover your limits, then you will strive, you will try harder. I copied, I wanted to be like Marge, there was something very spiritual about her work, her language was very exquisite, the cadence, the cuts, gusto ko ganon, no? But I realized later on that it wasn't really for me. Kasi hindi man ako si Marjorie Basco at insulto pala yun. No? If someone tells you na you write like Marge, you write like someone else, then what kind of a writer are you? Diba? What is a writer's task? To actually have your own signature, right, in your work. And that was not, so I realized early on, but how did it help me in a way? No? Because I learned the techniques, number one. Number two, it also enabled me to develop, or rather strengthen my politics. Dr. Ibasco is a feminist. No? So actually discovered ko na pwede pala magsulat ng gay poetry dahil sa kanya. Kasi isa sa my exercise namin sa klase before was actually about the body. You imagine yourself, but this was a free writing exercise where we were asked to just imagine ourselves, with our beloved. She did not mention the gender or specify the gender of the beloved. We just had to write it down. And of course what came out of the exercise was clearly a man.
That's porn.
No.
No, not yet.
No. Me, my God, I'm from Pavera. It's not me. I don't talk about tite or, or tamod. No. That is a different kind of poetics. All right. Not me. All right. But yes, there was. We had to be comfortable with our bodies. We had to imagine being with the beloved and all sorts of things that March made us do. And that was the beginning of my awakening as a gendered person. Diba? And from feminism, it would be easy to transfer or to segue to gay politics. After all, where did Butler and Eve Sedgwick come from? Diba? Gender studies. Alright? So, but why do we write? I wrote because, when I was young, I was naive. I wrote because I was, that's me, alright? Okay, because I thought, because like some of you, I fell in love. And so I had to write it all down. I had to, immortalize that loss. Well, or I had to heal, okay? But of course, after too many losses and too many poems, you realize that, after some time, you realize there's something more than just poetry as expression. Diba? Of course, if it's all expression, where will it take you? Diba? Basura rin siya. No? It will end up as trash. Okay? As bad as your ex. Okay? So, hindi maganda. Diba? So, hindi pwede. Minsan, hindi maganda siya therapeutic magsulat. No? Because someone hurt you or broke your heart. But that's the beginning pala. That's only phase 1. There's phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. May I go to this next slide here? Yeah, okay. We have many reasons for writing, for choosing to write, for choosing poetry. So let me now begin. Let me now tell you, okay, share with you what Auden said about poetry. As a rule, the sign that a beginner has a genuine original talent is that he is more interested in playing with words than in saying something original, right? Sabi nga ni Auden, the originality thing, would come in later. Importante talaga is language. As I said yesterday, diba? What is poetry? But a love affair, okay, a bloody affair rather, okay, with language, and that's what I suggest young writers keep in mind. Okay, next please. Of course, there are other writers who think differently, right? Because what is poetry? Poetry is about saying something new. So, totoo lang naman, lahat naman ng po yung sabihin, sabi na, diba? Everything about loss, death, love, desire, depression, okay, all the experiences that we go through as human beings, most of them have already been told, if not all of them. So what will make it different? It's not the matter, it's the manner, it's how you say it, right? So there are some people, okay, who believe, okay, so what is it, what's new about what you're writing? Okay, what will make your writing different? Let me read to you Carl Phillips, quote. Carl Phillips in his interviews, is not so gung-ho about his being black or being gay. At some point in his interviews, he would say it's an incidental. And yet, when push comes to shove, he will talk about, affirming identity, blah, blah, blah. But, okay, as to him, okay, let me quote him. The first political act, it seems to me, is to write a poem at all. It's a declaration that the already said, the available, is inadequate. And that the writer believes his own writing is the only remedy for that inaccuracy. Medyo mataray, no? Okay? Kung bata ka, ganyan ka mag-isip. Okay? Tingnan natin what you will become 10 years after. No? I think, okay, yung meron kang ganung courage, di ba? Yung meron kang ganung angas. Pero hanggang dyan lang. No? Pero maganda yun, but in short, I will take this as a challenge. No? How do I say things differently? How do I render things differently? Okay? Particularly in the LGBT community, pare-pareho rin na yung mga stories. Karamihan, di ba? Bawat community may sariling kwento nagkakaroon ng master narratives. So ano ang gusto mong gawin na naiiba? Paano mo i-rewrite ang master narrative? Diba? At paano sabihin ang nasabi na that love does not last. Di ba yung mga ganyan? Ano ba yung mga facts alam natin? Love does not last. Okay? Your lover... Ay, dito yan. Okay. Love often does not last. Diba? Okay? We can change boyfriends as often as we change underwear. Ano yung mga rules natin, no? About living the LGBT life. Diba? Pero sabi niya Garcia lahat no? Spirituality, lahat yan na niya, diba? Tapos sabi ko, so actually when I was writing, I was telling myself, what else could I write about? Okay, I couldn't write the way Javier Multidoro would write. Kasi siya yung mga tore, yung mga tamod, yung early young girl niya, yung ano niya, no?
Yung kahapon, meron pa rin eh.
Meron pa rin, di ba yung, pero that's Javier Multidoro, no? Pero kami mga tiga Puebla, ibang aming sensibility, alright? We don't talk about Tite or, or Tamod, no? It's so not us. So how do you talk about it, right? So, sabi, Single Garcia nag-myth, nag-sacred, pero ako hindi ako religious. I hate, religion, okay? Not religion per se, but how it actually promotes phobia, okay? The myopia of these people. So, natin ko. At some point in my life, I said, let me talk about the following. No? So I talked about being a queen. So I invented myself as the queen. Okay? Pero bago yun, the good news...
You were a queen.
Yeah.
You have to talk about that.
Salamat, okay, for preempting. Okay? What happened was that I eventually became a queen. Not that I wanted to be a queen. Okay? No, not really. But I did become one, alright, of some sort. I'll explain later. Okay, but so I wanted to explore something else. And so that was that thing that I felt had to be explored. You know, becoming a queen, number one. Number two, I'm also Chinese. So why not talk about my Chineseness? Why not explore it? Right? Number three, if Garcia is doing myths, no, why don't I do Chinese tales? Okay? So ginawa ko naman yung ano, no? So I had to retell Chinese myths, no? So the cut sleeve tales. So it was, writing is about that for me, no? Looking for something different. Okay? Kasi kung ginagawa ng iba, anong gagawin mo? Diba? O pwede naman gawin, diba? Yung ginawa ng iba, para sabihin mas maganda ka, diba? Or something. But I think you will find your own niche. It came easy to me, the Chinese legend, because I'm Chinese. It was easy for me to talk about Chineseness because I am Chinese. In short, it was part of who I was, part of who I am as an individual. Okay, let me, next please. Okay, but before I venture into the politics, okay, and the specifics of, you know, of my becoming, okay, so-and-so personae in my poetry, let me talk about, briefly about what I think poetry is. No? So this for me sums up what poetry, what LGBTQ poetry is all about. You know, I was really, I had to go through, read, or go over rather, so many texts, no, about gay writers or lesbian writers writing. Now, particularly my favorites na, novels nila. And this, when I found this, tontuwa ako, because I think this is what I feel. Okay, this I feel captures, you know, what I want to say about LGBTQ writing. Of course, she's coming from the perspective of a she's speaking as a lesbian, of course. Let me read it to you. Someone is writing a poem. Words are being set down in a force field. It's as if the words themselves have magnetic charges. They veer together or in polarity. They swerve against each other. Part of the force field, the charge, is the working history of the words themselves. How someone has known them, used them, doubted and relied on them in a life. Part of the movement among the words belongs to sound, the guttural, the liquid, the choppy, the drawn out, the breath, the visceral, the downlight. The theater of any poem is a collection of decisions about space and time. How are these words to lie on the page? With what pauses, what headlong motion, what phrasing? How can they meet the breath of the someone who comes along to read them? Diba? Yesterday I talked about sound, music, form, word choice. Everything is here. And of course it came from Adrian Rich, one of the most important public intellectuals of America. Please. As you can see, I'm performing myself. Okay? This is also my photo op. Kasi, it's part of the thing, you'll see. So, that was supposed to be the cover for my later book. Pero ayoko na. Parang depressed eh. Parang nalugi sa casino. No? Parang hindi masaya, parang walang love life. Okay? It had the ruffles, but in short, it didn't feel na, parang medyo Renaissance or something, whatever, old world. Japan lang nilagay yan. Diyan na siya mag-reform. Okay? So let me now talk about the second item, the poetry and the lyric subject. Here. Okay. Writing is a very personal thing, right? Particularly for us. Writers, for us LGBT writers. Okay, why is it personal? Because most of us, you know, bear with us, or rather have experienced, okay, persecution. Okay, writing brings with it, you know, a history of persecution. Number one, a history of trauma, right? And because we are living in a world that's very homophobic, right? Everything you see around you is about heterosexuals. There's this commercial, a milk commercial, Okay, it comes in 3 parts. The last part just came out this week. No, I was so happy that the couple was not together. Not because I don't believe that people shouldn't be happy. Okay, that there's no happy ending, but because I wanted women to. I wanted commercials that would show women independent of the men. But that you can build a family without a father. Bakit lagi kailangan ng family, babae, lalaki, at anak? Pero kahapon lang, o isang araw, nakita ko, nagkabalikan na. Okay, at galit ako. Okay, ang sama-sama ng loob ko. I was so unhappy and disappointed with the TV commercial because I was thinking of the possibilities. What if they were not together? What if the relationship wasn't working anymore because apparently she was a lesbian and he is a gay man? Or something like that, no? Ang nangyari, umulan lang, okay? Ang ganda-ganda ng commercial. The commercial was fabulous. Maganda, no? Pero gusto ko sana mayroong alternative space. Diba? Because we don't have that in mainstream media. Bench commercials, the gay commercial is shown only on the internet, right? Walang mga commercials sa mainstream nagsasabi na okay maging bakla, na pwede kang maging single parent, that that you can be a gay parent and be good at it, or be a transgender, be a trans woman and be a good mother. Mga ganon, wala tayong ganon eh. So in short, we're writing from the position of otherness, right? And that makes it ideological. That makes writing a political act. Okay. Of course, given that we actually came from a history of persecution or trauma, or whatever. Okay, writing will be personal, and it will most likely, and the best poetic form for that is the lyric, right? Which is personal, which is intimate. May I just show you the slide, please? Okay, since the 18th century, brevity, subjectivity, passion, and sensuality have been the qualities associated with a poem called lyric. Thus, in modernity, the term is used for a kind of poetry that expresses personal feeling in a concentrated and harmoniously arranged form, Poe and Coleridge, and that is indirectly addressed to the private reader, Wordsworth and Stuart Mill. A modern invention. This idea of lyric has profoundly influenced how we understand the history of all poetic genres. And of course, in terms of the lyric, for the 20th century, the one that is dominant, okay, has been dominant, I think, is confessional. No, can you please go there? Yes, please. Confession. Okay, hindi ko na basahin, no? But basically, okay, of course, I'm sure some of you are fans of Glass, okay, or Sexton. There is that confessional. There's usually that intimacy, or that intimate. There's something intimate, no, in what we write, and why not? Okay, why not talk about the self when that self had been denied expression for so long, right? It's also a there's also a romantic spirit, okay, in our work. And by romantic, I don't mean romantic amorous, no? I mean romantic in the anti-establishment sense, all right? The Rousseau sense, no? And that's what and number 2. And number 3, actually, in the Philippines, much of our poetry, is actually romantic in orientation and humanist, and I don't find anything wrong with that. But what I do find problematic is that these stories are usually about heterosexuals, no? Is there a space really for lesbians? Okay. What is the first lesbian poem, actually, that has appeared? That appeared in Philippine literature? Would you know? What's the first transgender poem? I know that the first lesbian collection, okay, is Double Helix by Aida Santos. She's our grandma. Okay, the first gay collection, I think, to my knowledge, as in patently gay collection, is Closet Quivers. if I'm not mistaken. That's of course by Dr. Neil Garcia. But definitely there were poems written about same-sex love, about being transgenders, about being, bakla, about being bayot, binabae, all sorts of things before. But where are they? Right? We don't have that. Parang, we need to do a lot more work. Okay? And as writers, as writers of poetry, as LGBT writers, is it not important that we talk about our lives? There's nothing wrong with the romantic part. There's nothing wrong with the confessional, with confessionalism or confessional poetry. Okay, but it would be a great loss if you wouldn't inscribe your sexuality, your identity in your own writing. Right? May we continue? Next, please. But of course, you have to remember, this is something that people who dabble in nonfiction, know too well. The persona or the personae, the characters that you create in your poetry, are not you, and yet they're also you, right? There is no 100%. It's not about we're talking about referentiality. What comes out in your poem is not you exactly, right? In fact, if you go to the new critics, when we read text, we don't care about the author, right? We don't care about the author, and I think it's a good training ground for not. To a certain extent, the very fact that we don't associate the author with the persona means that you are free. That it only assumes that the created persona, that the persona is not necessarily the author, and therefore, as a writer, you can come up with so many selves. Okay, who may bear traces of you or not. Okay, but you are free to invent yourself, or aspects or facets of yourself in your own poetry. But there's something problematic, of course, about nucleacism, or the formalist reading. I'll talk about that later. But for now, let me mention Mark Doty. Mark Doty is my favorite poet because of his images, because of the excess in his poetry. I also like him because he has also written non-fiction text. And so in this quote, he's talking about being an LGBT as a gay non-fiction writer and as a poet. And let me read it to you. But memorist and poet are in fact balancing three different kinds of allegiance: to one's own sense of reality, to the aesthetic needs of one's writing. I'm so sorry, okay for the typo, and to one's ethical sense, the need to treat others responsibly. It's almost as if these three considerations occur in that order, actually. I usually begin with a desire to describe some aspect of experience, and then I find the poem itself taking over. The shaping of language becomes more important, and the poem begins to take on a direction of its own. And somewhere along the way, the ethical implications of what I've made also present themselves. Ultimately, in completing a poem, you have to negotiate with all three of those contexts at once. But I also think that in the initial writing process, of course, you just have to make what you want to make. Very good advice, right? Because you can never really sabi nga ni Ate P, diba? You can never tell. Poetry doesn't come to you, as a finished product. And that's the exciting part about poetry or writing itself or art itself. It's an adventure. All you know, for instance, is that you know the final line. Diba? I want my ending to be this. But the rest is a mystery. And so you go on your own pilgrimage, on your own poetic pilgrimage. And that's the joy. Why did I mention this also? Because what is the self to begin with? The self is only what? Is the self real? Partly, yes. But the self is a linguistic invention. The self is a product of language. The self is a made-up thing. The self is a construct. The self is a pose. The self, kaya ang ganda yung word, a poser. Diba? Because, you know, the self is something that we can continuously invent. You know, you can produce so many gay cells, LGBT cells in your poetry. All of them, you know, in short, the self is inexhaustible. You know, poetry is a performance. Poetry is about inventing the self. Of course, non-fiction writers know that. No, I mean, even if non-fiction writers are supposed to tell the truth, they know, they will accept, you know, that the self is indeed, you know, a form of fiction, and that's something that we must acknowledge and understand, you know, as writers of poetry. The personae in your poetry need not be you. It's a wrong assumption. Parang, ikaw ba yan? Parang natatakot tayo magsuot minsan, di ba? Na parang, nako, my poem is about rape. Baka sabihin na ni-rape ako. Wala naman tangka ah. Okay? Wala naman, may mga ganung mga ano, no? Yung baka sabihin na, ganyan. And you know, you can write anything you want. Because, you know, you are not, it's a paradox, you are not the persona, and yet you are that persona. I mean, an aspect or a facet of your existence. No, let me now what makes the poem seem intimate? No, it's a it's a product of language, basically. All right. So, but the other question is this, no? So, if the self is an invention, it's an invented self, it's a fabricated, curated self, no? What else is there? I look at it as a source of joy, right? Because it only is a testament to the power of poetry to challenge you, to imagine new forms of existence, new lives, new ways of being human. Okay? Next, the thing is, okay, another question we need to understand is this. But what is the gay self? Yun ang problema natin. Ano talaga ang gay? Ano ba talaga ang lesbian? That's something that that's also something that we need to actually clarify for ourselves. Ano ba talaga ako? Am I a lesbian? Am I queer? Am I transgender? Am I bayot? Okay, yung mga bi, ang tawag sa kanila bayot. No? Okay? Karamihan, no? Kasi maraming mga bi, totoo lang, kuseta. Okay, and historically, that's been documented. No? 80s pa lang, okay, Michael Tan had already talked about, you know, gay men self-identifying as bi. They never had sex with women. Okay? But they would self-ID as bi because of so many things. Diba? Perhaps internalized homophobia, perhaps, you know, they're afraid to come out. Perhaps they wanted to offer their parents the possibility that, you know, ay kalahati lang naman, pwede pa. There's false hope in calling yourself bi. Or perhaps they did not like the idea of bakla, because to them, bakla was so low class, and they're middle class. So it's a function of class. My point is, you know, if you are going to invent the self, then you might as well clarify for yourself what kind of self you are going to be constructing or fashioning in your poetry. Sa akin, to me, you are free, writers are free to create the identities that they want to write about, or they want to create. Okay? The important thing is that you are happy with yourself. Because sa totoo lang, no, your identification will change. No? Today you're top, tomorrow you're bottom. Okay? Today you are paminta, tomorrow you're pag-girl, super pag-girl, Yukon level. You know? And so who is to judge? Who is to tell you that you're not supposed to do that? No one. And why should you allow people to do that? Right? It's about you. It's about you being comfortable with your chosen subject position, with your gender performances, your gender expression. Okay? And what is that's very, very important, because when you are writing, because writing gay poetry, lesbian poetry, transgender poetry is political. everything's political, but it becomes more political when you are LGBTQ, right? And therefore, you need to sort things out for yourself. Where do I belong? Alin, saan ka? Diba? At saan ka masaya ngayon? Ang point ko kasi, identities change. Right? Wala namang guarantee eh. Ngayon, lesbian ka. Meron ko kaibigan, super love ko siya, ang galing kanyang writer. Ngayon, lesbian siya. Pero she's living a heterosexual existence. Parang medyo queer na, di ba? Pero hindi eh. Di ba? Parang you ought to live the life you want. Nung bata ako, medyo medyo mahadera ako, maldita ako. Hindi ako naniniwala na ang mga bakla magiging masaya sa piling ng lalaki. Yung mga friends kong bakla talaga, bakla 1.0. Ano ba ang bakla 1.0? The bakla, these are the bakla who are, who are effeminate and potentially cross-dress, right? According to Garcia, no? Yan yung bakla 1.0, right? Pero I call it 1.0. Bakit? Kasi nga meron ng mga baklang bato. Diba? At meron tayo sa kwartong ito, no? I think, no? Hindi ba? Hindi ba? Baka meron tayong mga bortang bakla, di ba? Baklang bato or something. Ang dami-dami ng... Muscle Mary. Ang dami ng ano eh. Nagbago na ang categories, no? Ang point ko, ano ang point ko? Dali. Nasa na ba ako? Ang point ko, nagbago rin ang bakla, di ba? Ang mismong kategoryang bakla ay nagbago, subject to revision. Kung yun ay subject to revision, bakit ikaw hindi? Di ba? At dapat masaya ka. You should be happy kung saan ka. Ang importante, hindi ka mag-discriminate ng iba. Yung gano'n, no? So, may point ako, isang kalimutan ko. What is it? Oh my God. Yun, so, it's important that we find our own place under the sun. Okay? Kasi minsan din ang kategorya, sa totoo lang, categories compartmentalize. Categories limit. Okay? I think I remember in an interview with, in a Carol Phillips interview, parang he mentioned about resisting, resisting definitions. Kasi sa totoo lang, yung definitions sometimes do not actually quite define our sense of who we are. Diba? For instance, ano ang tawag mo sa mga lalaki na pumapato sa mga bakla? They say that they love the bakla. Doesn't that make them homosexual? Right, on the one hand. But we're talking about, we're talking about individuals who come from a certain culture with its own way of mapping sexual desires. In the Philippines, in the Philippine gender system, the lalaki who makes patol, who has sex with the bakla, is not considered a homosexual or a bakla. But technically, the fact that he is engaging in same-sex acts, doesn't that make him some sort of homosexual? Doesn't that make him queer? Okay. What about those what about those men who make patol, or who falls in love, or men who fall in love with trans women? Okay. What do you call them? Okay. Are they hetero, homo, queer? It means so many things to choose from. All you have to do as a writer is to make a choice and be happy with it, knowing that, okay, that self is not an essential, fixed self. It is changing. You can continuously reinvent yourself. Just be, ako, sa akin, tumanda na akong ganito. So, but you have to affirm that self. There's that idea. Now, let me now talk about poetry as a hermeneutic practice. The thing is, as I've said, everywhere around you, you see heteronormativity. You see, when you talk about love stories, lagi yan about man and woman. When you talk about family, man, woman, and child. And I hate it. Okay? I'm so fortunate that at home, it's the opposite. When my brother and I talk about love stories, it's always about men and loving men. Because my brother is also gay. No? And my mother is so used to it. You
Your
know?
poor mother.
My poor mother. My brother, downloads porn with my mom around. Okay? My brother, his laptop, yung mga ano niya, yung mga, what do you call that thing? That thing yung nakalagay sa ano? The screensaver, the desktop wallpaper, they're all bodies of men. And all my mother could say is, ang ganda ng katawan niyan, ha? Yeah, she's very supportive now. And and when we watch TV, my mother has the hots for Derek Monasterio. He is the apple of her eye now. When I was younger, it was Matthew Mendoza. Read my essays, no? Ngayon siya na. Ngayon medyo bata-bata, no? Si Derek Monasterio. At talaga naman pong nakakatuwa yung lalaking yun, no? Yummy, no? And so my mother, is a fan of her. My brother also likes him. And I also kinda, okay, pwede na, okay, nakakatay bata, kalima. I mean, imagine mo, in our household, mother and two sons, having the hearts for the same man, diba? And talaga nakalagay sa ng brother ko ha, yung abs ni Derek. Okay? And so to my mom, it's just, a fact of life. In fact, minsan, I tell her na kitunggay, ay maganda mo mama, kapag kitunggay, nagalit pa siya. Ang sabi niya sa akin, walang abs! So my mother, in her own way, is kind of queer, right?
Queer to her.
Successfully so. Pero when I was young, 20 plus years ago, she was homophobic. As in, super. As in. I think, it's just one story that, it means that, there's hope. That you don't need to electrocute them. Okay? It just takes love, understanding, I think sometimes parents are the first to know, totoo lang. But they're the last to be told. Diba? For some of us, ganun yun eh, diba? Meron kaibigan, totoo lang, out sa buong bayan. Daming jowa. Pero ang ending, hindi alam ng family niya. At published siya sa mga gay anthologies, ha? Pero I'm sure the family knows. They just don't talk about it. Right? Pero, bayo sa kwento ko ha, yung bakla na may jowa siya, na lalaki. Nung bata ako, masyado ko may opik eh. Sabi ko parang, hindi ka maging masaya dyan, iwanan ka niyan. Dahil lalaki yan, babakla ka. Ang happy mo dapat, gay din, ganyan. Alam mo, pakalamera ako, di ba? Impacta, no? May na-realize ko na lang, nasa mas ugali ko, no? Kasi dapat, I should have respected his choice. Kasi may kanya-kanya naman tayong happiness eh. May kanya-kanya tayong script na pinapalo. May kanya-kanya tayong performances. Kanya-kanyang show. Okay? Walang basagan ng trip. Okay? Now, let's go to this part, no? Poetry as romantic practice. Okay? Ang problema natin kasi talaga, as I've said, no? Heteronormative. So, how do you really define what gay writing is? How do you define gay writing as writing? Mahirap. Should the writer be gay or lesbian? Should lesbian be central? Should lesbian love be central to the text? Okay, Bonnie Zimmerman, in her work on lesbian fiction, she's very careful to define lesbian fiction. And she would, of course, qualify it. That this definition works only for this period. Lesbian fiction, for this blah, 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 is blah, blah, blah. And I think that's something that we need to be more conscious of. Okay, because, conventions, identities, okay, politics, all of these will change. Alright? But one thing is certain, why is it important? How do you actually inscribe yourself in your poetry, in your LGBT poetry? Alright? To suggest that, let me now read to you Mark Doty's critique of Harold Bloom's work. Okay? Ang ganda ng sabi niya. To suggest that their work has no social context or content, that it is not a response to the pressure of reality. It's not to elevate them, but to diminish them. to relegate poems which embody profound struggles to a kind of mere beauty, devoid of the scarring and deepening intrusions of hell. He's talking about I forgot the writer, Crane, no? A gay poem by Crane. No? This poem leads you to suspect that the exact converse of Bloom's statement is true. White buildings wouldn't have been possible if aesthetics were autonomous. Its hard-won beauty is indebted, paradoxically, to the deforming forces of social reality, of ideology. This is what I've been saying. Reading itself is also a political act. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, balik po tayo. Sorry. So, what am I saying? No? Let me go back. Let me go to my paper. Okay, so yeah. Should everything we write be about gayness or lesbian? As I said, here determined, di ba? The point is that, but I think now there is a need to keep talking about it, to keep writing stories about ourselves, because there is none. Okay, and to change the way we read literature. Diba? That's why we're here. We need to contribute to the dialogue, to the conversation, to the contestation. Okay, what we're doing as writers is critique the establishment for Islamophobia, for heterosexism. Nakaka-depress, diba? Hanggang ngayon wala tayong makita, walang mga commercials na about gay, walang mga, diba? Wala, no? Na positive, no? Na life-affirming, no? Wala kang makita sa TV, diba? Don't you want to see yourself on television, or aspects or facets of yourself on television, or in the movies? Diba? Meron tayong mga TV shows, in fairness, no? Meron, no? Pero, is it more token than anything? I think we need to ask it. So, what am I saying? No? If poetry is a hermeneutic practice, then what must we do as queer writers, as LGBT writers? Then we have to start reading, then we have to start queering, text. Then we have to start acknowledging, or freeing ourselves from this heterocentric trap. We have been digesting their stories for the longest time. It's time that we serve them ours, right? Meron pa akong sabihin, nakalimutan ko but I'll just go back to it later. Okay, next please. So as I keep saying, as I will keep saying forever and ever, poetry, art is definitely, writing is a political act. Okay, as you can see, sino yung dalawang dyan maganda. That's, of course, Neil Garcia, and that's me. Nung medyo bata-bata pa ako. That was maybe 14 years ago or so, 15 years ago. Kasi totoo lang naman, we've been attending marches, no? Except on Saturdays, pumitasi ako, but I normally like attending LGBT events, no? Marches. The last one I missed because of my class. Sayang, maganda raw, masaya daw Ang dami-daming maten. Nakakatuwa, di ba? Parang, isn't it heartening to see people supporting you, supporting your cause? Let me, please, next slide, please. Let me give you this favorite quote of mine by Adrian Rich. I take it that poetry, if it's poetry, is liberatory and it's cool. Why are we writing poetry as LGBTQ? Part of it is to help liberate ourselves through art. Okay, let's continue, please. This is Carl Phillips, no? This is more assimilationist, because at the end of it all, in this respect, then, my poems become examples of how one gay black man sees society, and they become a means by which society can learn something about what it means to be gay black man. What I hope is learned is that we all have the same hungers, fears, needs, etc., and that sexuality and race are just as much the point as they are not. Continue, please. a while ago I mentioned Dr. Baytan's work, right? And I asked you about what it means to be gay, what is gay. I also mentioned how categories actually can be limiting sometimes. Let me now quote Dr. Michael Elkan, Survival Through Pluralism. My concern is that we may be looking for unity when such unity, in an organic or formal sense, may not be necessary. The diversity of communities is important because it allows for a constant validation, for want of a better term, of what might be a community experience situated in history. This necessarily includes men and women who do not self-identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual or even MSM. The point here of the essay, the entire essay, lest it be misread, no, is that we are a diverse culture. It's really difficult, to pigeonhole people into discrete categories. There are always excesses, So let me now go to this part. Let me now briefly talk about my own personal poetics. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay. Okay.
There you go.
I'm very sorry. I cannot find the. I don't know why I did it like that. Siguro kasi pangit yung mukha ko siya dito tayo. Or something. Pero I can't find the picture anymore. No? Parang it's in my house. That's the real.
That's the coronation.
No, that's the farewell. Hindi pa farewell walk yan. Ano naman yan? Tawag dyan. Swimsuit competition, di ba?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, syempre yung mga bakla, they were gonna...
The context for that first.
The context is TLF. No? TLF, is a community for MSM people. And meron siyang, we hold, for the socials night, we hold pageants. Okay? Unfortunately, marami kong nasali, parang for fun. It's just a campy thing. And then they all backed out. Okay? Parang ganyan, no? So in the end, okay, ako yung nanalo, no? Maraming contestants but from other batches, no? So ako yung nanalo. And so akala ko tapos na. Akala ko tapos na yung aking gig, no? As a queen after being crowned. But of course, a queen has to what? Pass on the crown to the next queen. So yan, yun ang nangyari, no? So happy naman na nakita ko yung I found my aunt's bathing suit. Yeah. At sinuot ko, no? At doble kang high heels. In fairness, no?
Maganda yun. So, hindi na ganyan na yun.
Oy! Dali lang, ha? Okay. But anyway, continue tayo, please, no? So I will end with my poem, Queen, no? Some of you may have read it already, no? Mama, the rhinestones are falling one by one. Because I always put the crown on my head when you and Papa are sleeping. Imagine, a fairy at the center stands with her wand that stirs glowing waves of magic like seashells in the dark. The crown is divine. Mama, the gown I wore that night is fading in the closet. Unwashed black velvet exuding beauty, irretrievably gone. It's a backless, leafless tube with big slits on the side, silver sequins on the padded buttons, and white gloves for the spectacular beauty that I am. Mama, my shoe size is 10 and the pair I bought is plain, pure black, 4-inch heels, like ice cream cones. Enough to make me feel like Diana. When they stab the marble floor, I hear the clicking of like regal steps from a castle far away. One night, the queen knew. Mama, my sash is kept in a hidden drawer where secrets abound as beautiful boys thriving on paper. It is white, laced with gold strips on the side, and reads, Miss Gay Universe, 1995. They all love that beauty your son when he walked. No doubt, the ribbon was made for my hips. Mama, as you sleep in the other room, I am Sushmita. Head up, teeth white, lips red and white. Hands touching hips, foamy buzzing out, tummy tucked. In my mind, Mama, I'm holding a fresh bouquet, waving to a feverish crowd. And you are there crying, because it's your son's farewell walk. So that's how it's on the one hand, it's very, very personal, right? but it's also, for me, an ironic or campy text. Because what I wanted to show, aside from it being a coming out poem of some sort, is that identity is really a performance. Right? So you can see size 10. Diba? Ang paa, sobra, basketball player. You know? It's something that you keep, you know, and I think, no, at the end of it, you know, that's a funny thing in the poem for me. It's a pun, eh? Queen, but closet queen as well. And at the same time, at the end, you know, the mom is crying not because her son is gay, but because her son's reign is over. It's over. Yung ganun yung, look at the things that, that's what I thought I was doing then. You know? Of course, it has its repercussions. You know, parang sino ka mahal sa akin? Kung pa-girl, di ba? Kung naging, if you wrote the queen, sings the blues, of course your marketability drops, right? But actually, to me, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm old. No? In fact, what I do is this. When someone is courting me and I don't like him, what I do is this. I ask my best friend, Tassim, to go with me to the mall, and you know, and we take that guy, we tag him along to the shoe store, and we try on so many shoes. Even if I wouldn't really do that, I don't wear heels like that. No? It's just a persona.
Like stilettos?
Oh, stilettos or something like that.
Turn someone off.
May I put on to test that someone, or to turn him, either turn him off or to test him. Diba? Because if he really loves me, diba, then he will accept me for who I am. Hindi yung sabihin niya, ay, naku, may bahid. Ayoko, sorry pare, gusto ko no trace. Get me? You know, I want someone to be comfortable with me. Okay?
Why don't you just show your beauty pageant pictures kasi?
Why not? Once a queen, always a queen. That's the scene. Diba? Okay, so let me end this talk with, parang akong sabihin, no? Pero let me end with this, on this note. Okay? Maybe the target nowadays is not to discover what we are, but to refuse what we are. From Michel Foucault. Let me, yeah, since I'm performing the self, I'm going to show you the next slide. Hindi naman na yan. Diba? Iba-iba. Okay, next pa. Gusto ko pa more. Diba? Okay. So what I'm saying is, kaya na. Sige, next na, please. Okay. Okay, hindi ako yan, ha? How I wish. No? Ako yan dun, oh. Okay. What I'm saying, let me now end, no? Wala tayong time kasi, but I will give you my parting, sorry, I need to say this, no? Here, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Self-identification changes. Politics changes. Style changes. What remains? Your commitment to your art. Your commitment to your cause. I hope that, you will be more forgiving of your own shortcomings. Okay? And be more accepting of other people's difference and of your own otherness. There are some poems of mine I'm so ashamed of them. Okay? Parang ngayon, no? At this point. Pero hindi na eh. Sinulat ko na sila. Pangatawanan ko na sila. Diba? You will actually, some of the poems that you have that you will write, you will eventually abandon or forsake. But you have to accept them because they're part of your own becoming as writers. Poetry, in the end, for me, is a celebration. It's a celebration of our uniqueness, of our difference, of the choices that we make as individuals, as gendered, sexual beings, and as artists. So I wish you a wonderful journey. God bless.
Hello. We have a 15-minute break, so you can have your snacks, and then afterwards, then or so. Sorry. I guess then at 20 we can come back for the first session. Mariel's
So